The one thing you need in order to be a successful merc in Night City is a good fixer. You also need a girlfriend who's 10 years older than you, but the fixer is more important. The fixer not only needs to be good at what they do, but they need to be a good person. No one wants to work with a total psychopath. Now there are a total of 8 fixers, not including Dexter Deshawn, considering that he's dead. I'm going to be ranking them based on who they are, what they do, the quality of their gigs, the rewards, and a few other roleplay aspects. So let's go ahead and rank all of the fixers in Cyberpunk from worst to best. You'd think that a place as rich and classy as Westbrook, the place where legendary rock stars and the heir to the Arasaka Empire live, would only have the best of the best fixers. Nope. She's a piece of garbage. Wakako Okada hangs her massive eye bags in a disgusting place full of prostitutes called Jig Jig Street, and is the leader, or rather handler, of the Tiger Claws. I'm not exactly sure what she is, but the Tiger Claws do her bidding. Now you may be wondering why Wakako is such a piece of human filth. Well, let me enlighten you. After Evelyn Parker decided to screw over the Voodoo Boys by hiring you and Jackie to break into Konpeki Plaza, Evelyn went back to work at Clouds, where she thought she'd be safe from the Voodoo Boys' wrath. Unfortunately, they struck her in the middle of a session and essentially went brain dead. Woodman, the caretaker at Clouds, pawned her off to a ripperdoc on Jig Jig Street called Fingers. Fingers couldn't do anything for her, being almost brain dead and all, so he contacted the local fixer, Wakako, who then sold her off to the Scavs, who then used her as a doll for multiple XBDs, the physical and psychological trauma of which inevitably caused her to pull a Hannah Baker. The whole reason Evelyn committed the 13th reason was because Wakako sold her off to the Scavs. Without her interjection, Evelyn Parker would be alive and almost well, considering the brain hemorrhage. Wakako is easily one of the most despicable humans in Night City, and someone like her really shouldn't be in positions of power. She also threatens you multiple times throughout the game as well, so not someone I would personally want to associate with. If Wakako being a terrible person wasn't bad enough, her jobs aren't very good either. She only offers 8 gigs, most of which are extremely boring and tedious. And even when you do a good job, she will find a reason for how you didn't do it right, then berates you for it. And if that wasn't bad enough, her gigs pay chump change despite being the most luxurious district in the entire city. But at least you get a decent sword as a reward for doing them all. Not enough to make it worth it though. With all of that in mind, Wakako is easily the worst fixer in Night City by a long shot. Besides, you know she's not a good fixer when all of the girl boss Twitch streamers say she's the best fixer. The heart of Night City is known as Corpo Plaza, or it would be if Night City had a heart to begin with. Corpo Plaza's fixer is named Dino Dinovic. He's not a terrible person like Wakako, but he gives off major boomer vibes, thinking he's better than everyone just because he's older. Dino only has 5 gigs, all of which are actually pretty easy and do pay a hefty amount. But if you thought Wakako's nagging was bad, then get a load of this. Dino will always find a way to criticize your work, and the reward you get for completing all of the gigs is just terrible. Dino is honestly just a bare bones fixer that we almost never see. In fact, he is the only fixer that you do not ever need to see or talk to during the main story and side quests. So as long as you don't do any of his gigs, you will never see or talk to him. Now I'm probably going to get some hate for this one, but the Queen of the Afterlife is nothing but a fraud. Rogue is the only person from the bombing of Arasaka Tower to get a happy ending. That's because she sold herself to Arasaka, and there's nothing I hate more than a fraud. You can get a good idea of what kind of person Rogue really is just by playing the game, but she's really impatient, treats you like you're an idiot, and acts like she worked for her status as if she wasn't just an industry plant. But manipulating Pan Am for personal gain is where I draw the line. She only takes you seriously when she finds out Johnny has been inside of you. Now talk about a jealous ex-girlfriend. Once she does realize Johnny is back, she quickly tries to set things straight so Johnny doesn't think she's a fraud. to no avail. Rogue does offer a few pretty decent gigs, and she pays you pretty handsomely. But again, you know she's not a good fixer when all of the girl boss Twitch streamers say she's the best. The Badlands has their own fixer, and she's not bad. Dakota Smith is interesting as she is a member of the Aldecaldos. You know, that really awesome cult that Pan Am is from? Being an Aldecaldo means that Dakota has principles, honor, and isn't some schmuck that'll sell you out for a double cheeseburger. She also helps you during the Aldecaldo ending of the game. So we finally have a fixer that isn't a pathetic excuse of a human being. Dakota's gigs aren't bad either, the pay is decent, and the jobs are pretty interesting. Besides, driving around the Badlands is pretty fun. There's just something that's therapeutic about it. I don't really know how to describe it, but once you complete her gigs, you get a clean version of the Mackinac truck. It's the closest thing you'll get to Pan Am's truck, and it's a great substitute for Claire's Beast if you are allergic to stuffed animals, don't support transgenderism, or just really don't like Claire's character to the point that you wish you could kill her instead of Samson. Overall, Dakota is actually an awesome fixer. However, there are just better fixers out there. So if you didn't like all of the negativity in the video so far, then you can rest assured that it ends here. By now, we all know that the media lies, unless you're Regina Jones, the fixer for Watson. Regina used to be a media vulture, but struck out on her own to make a name for herself and to remain independent. She's also kind of a good person. She has a strong fixation on a disease called cyberpsychosis, where people are driven crazy by what appears to be malfunctioning cyberware. However, Regina believes that there's something else that's causing it, and that it's not just a cyberware overload. And upon helping her with this endeavor, you'll come to realize that it is indeed not the cyberware that's causing it. She wants you to non-lethally take down cyberpsychos around Night City, investigate the situation, then send her any information that you find. This is also so she can test different therapies in order to find a treatment for the cyberpsychos that don't involve just straight up killing them. This is something that Regina is really passionate about, and there's nothing more attractive than a woman with passion, especially on something so noble like cyberpsychosis when everyone else has completely written them off. And it only gets better when you realize that cyberpsychosis doesn't actually exist and it's just people having a mental breakdown. The small minority of people who just so happen to be violent. Or this could all just be an allegory for men's mental health awareness, but that's probably just a reach. Regina's gigs aren't terrible, but some of the fixers mentioned earlier have better gigs. Regina's gigs are more of a case of a quantity over quality. For the most part, her gigs are either very short or way too long, and then pay next to nothing. At least the earlier gigs. Her later gigs are definitely higher paying, but you have to do a lot of jobs to unlock them. And if you mess up one of the gig's optional objectives, Regina will scold you for it, especially on gigs where the optional objective is extremely difficult or unrealistic. Overall, Regina isn't a very good fixer, but she is an amazing person. If it wasn't for her involvement with the cyberpsychos, she might be lower on this list. Now I know it's all politically correct to hate on religion or whatever. The Valentinos are a religious gang ran by one Sebastian Ibarra, also known as Padre, the fixer for Haywood. And with religion comes a sense of morals and integrity. It's interesting to see religion like this displayed in a way that's actually cool and unique. Padre is as honorable as they come. He's well respected for his honesty and integrity, and feared for his ruthlessness and ability to always keep his word. Do you remember the guy from the Street Kid prologue that pulls a gun on him? Padre says he will pay for it, and we never hear from him again. However, you can find his body in Haywood where you can see he was tortured and executed, along with an archived conversation between him and Padre. So it seems he paid for it indeed. Padre by far has the best gigs in the base game. I don't know what it is about Haywood, but the gigs here are all fun, have good pacing, and manage to keep your attention the entire time. Padre will always praise you and be grateful for completing a job. Even if you completely butcher a job to the point where it could barely be called completed, instead of lashing out at you, he says, and I quote, "You are an angel sent by God," showing that he never takes you for granted. You even get a decent weapon for completing all of his gigs. I really like Padre, and since he's only the third best fixer, things are only going to get better from here. Dogtown is a dangerous place full of dangerous people, ran by a dangerous dictator with a dangerous army, and the fixer? Actually, a pretty cool dude. Mr. Hands resides in the Heavy Hearts Club, which is the giant pyramid in Dogtown. Mr. Hands is technically the fixer for all of Pacifica, but he only has one gig outside of Dogtown, and it's as simple as retrieving a van. He mainly has his focus on Dogtown, which is gated off from the rest of the city. Mr. Hands is professional, intelligent, and has a wicked sense of humor. He is very kind and friendly, but manages to keep things extremely professional, making him always a pleasure to work with. He talks in a very intellectual manner and uses a lot of fancy words, and not in the cavernacle pseudo-intellectual way either. His sense of humor is definitely unique. If you work with him on the MaxTac convoy during the DLC, he will later call you and tell you that the information you obtained was, and I quote, testicle-ticklingly delightful. And then he will drop off a gift at your house and refuses to elaborate further. Mr. Hands only has a couple handful of gigs, but his gigs are driven by narrative as opposed to the typical fetch, steal, rescue missions that everyone else has. These gigs could actually pass as side quests, some of which are my favorite parts of the entire game. And I do hope gigs are like this in the sequel. That is, if they decide to do gigs again. Completing all of his gigs gets you a really cool car that kinda fits the whole spy political thriller vibe that the DLC has going on. Mr. Hands is definitely the fixer I'd call if I ever needed anything. Definitely the right fixer for a place like Dogtown. And by process of elimination, you know who the best fixer in Night City is. And it's none other than Oliver Tree. I actually have no idea who that is, but everyone keeps commenting that he looks like him. Muammar Reyes, also known as El Capitan, is the fixer for Santo Domingo, the suburban district of Night City. El Capitan is known for harassing you with offers to buy cars, so he may come off as a sleazy salesman that only cares about making money. But that's not entirely true. But El Capitan will have you steal marked cars from all over Night City and deliver them to his garage so he can turn around and sell them. After you deliver 7 of these, he will ask you for your help stealing an Arasaka medical truck. He wants this truck so he can open up a free clinic to help sick people, especially children in Santo Domingo, who are too poor to afford clean water, let alone treatment for the illnesses they get from drinking said water, since the Arasaka Empire basically poisoned the water supply. El Capitan also keeps his word. After a few days, he will tell you that they already performed 17 life-saving operations. El Capitan may be a businessman, but he has a sense of integrity and is far from sleazy. He also talks about you behind your back. But no, he's not talking smack. Rather, he actually talks about how amazing and reliable you are. The best way to make friends is to compliment them behind their backs. And this is a real life lesson as well. Unless you're talking about Zoomers, because they'll think you're trying to have sex with everyone because their brains have been turned to rot by social media. But under normal circumstances, it's the best way to be liked by mature adults, and I am speaking from experience on that one. Now, his gigs aren't anything special, but they're not bad either, and the pay is pretty good, and there's not too many of them, so completing his district is fairly simple and enjoyable. It's perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Although not having the best gigs, El Capitan is definitely the best person on this list, and an absolute chad of a fixer, but minus points for the terrible haircut. There you have it, that was every fixer in Cyberpunk ranked worst to best. Feel free to let me know which fixers are your favorites and least favorites. And if you want to see more Cyberpunk and other RPG related content, then feel free to subscribe. Anyways, I'll see you later, and remember, the media lies.